We really appreciate your support and extend our warmest welcome to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Uthran Nairn, Michael D. Higgins. Thank you.
Well, Cohilly Seguini Cor, Quirinche, Saram Veresh, in atmosphere na leachta rish. Agus tá násaram féinúr gudachta le haig siúla fuair amach na míocht colúiste na trinúide. Siúns gannaf agus tá sprágul agus tá trál agus bawálam a bhuichas a gháileat sa héan Patrick Lynch as an gurib fíl seo agus mullim sibh giléras Porta Glaco san fórum táfachtach seo. It's a very great atmosphere. It's a great pleasure to be back in the atmosphere of a lecture theatre. It automatically confers a great feeling of freedom on me, which I hope to exercise. I'm very grateful for the invitation to speak at a Students' Economic Forum, because as is clear from the few remarks I have to make, I believe we are in an atmosphere of great and fundamental change, including intellectual change. And it is my wish and my hope that all of you will put your stamp on the reconstitution of many of the subjects that are today taught in universities, that they will in fact be different after you've finished with them. There are many questions that need to be raised in public discourse here in Ireland, and you will have many of them during the course of the forum. These issues must be raised with seriousness if we are to restore not just our economic growth in financial terms, but our confidence, I believe, in political economy as a discipline and a source of policy choice, as well as confidence in ourselves as a people and a society. We need to rebuild a sense of trust and community so that we can build a new economy predicated on a shared common good, rather than speculative aspirations for individual aggrandizement far removed from the real economy in a national or international traded sense. And there are real and fundamental differences between the economy towards which political science and political economy was addressed, and the more recent decades, speculative virtual froth to which, in fact, generated forms of economic description and comment, but hardly anything serious theoretically. When I was inaugurated as President of Ireland last year, I stated that we must seek to build together an active, inclusive citizenship. I also stressed the importance of citizens of all ages making their own imaginative and practical contribution to the shaping of a shared future. An event like this one, then, that I open here today, reassures me that we have many young and active citizens anxious to play their part in crafting the Ireland in which they wish to live, work, and in which they will rear their families in the future. Young people who have the will to participate and the imagination not only to seize the opportunities that come their way, but to create new versions of economy and scholarship, to be the arrow, not the target, as I frequently quote Raymond Williams, that of the society they wish to shape and share in the years ahead. You will immediately say, I am not an advocate of that pressure which might come on universities to fill any narrow neo-utilitarian bias of the moment, or form of the economy which may prove to be ephemeral. Last week, the World Economic Forum held in Switzerland with the theme Great Transformation, Shaping New Models. I was particularly struck by the words of Professor Klaus Schwab on the theme of transformation that dominated this year's proceedings. He asks hard questions about the nature and sustainability of economic growth into the future and its environmental and social impacts and costs. He also asks how economic gains should be distributed and concluded. The time has come to embrace a much more holistic, inclusive and qualitative approach to economic development, based on the stakeholder and not on a pure shareholder concept. The very difficult circumstances that we as a nation find ourselves in today clearly demonstrates the symbiotic relationship between economics and the well-being of society. Economics is essentially about scarcity and choice, and is now at the heart of all decision-making. Individuals, businesses, and governments all face very difficult decisions and choices in terms of allocating increasingly scarce resources. The assumptions underlying economic science and their outworking in policy application not only influence the hard decisions of government, but also permeate through everyday life, impacting on the increasingly complex and challenging problems faced by individuals and families. We live at a time when the forces that lean on economics are less and less accountable, and thus a confrontation between unaccountable economic forces and a democracy that is appearing weaker, losing legitimation, looms ever closer. We know that the present economic morass through which we are struggling did not come about by accident. We know it came about because of a failed paradigm of economic policy, undeclared assumptions, skewed values, and the growth of a culture where our assets were valued and utilized not only on purely material considerations, but on an open-ended speculative basis. It was a version of economics that was rooted in a radical individualism and a theory of infallible, efficient markets delivered through policies of light or no regulation. We are all now grappling with the enormous consequences of that failure and must now move forward to a better model, one that will build social cohesion and provide a sustainable basis for economic development. We must reject the notion of normative citizens being reduced to the status of disaggregated rational utility maximizers in our theories and policies. I believe those days might well be over in serious economic thought. From the earliest days of the study of global economics, matters of serious ethical import were up for discussion according to whichever model was favored. That is still true today. Those who form public policy at every turn must face up to serious trade-offs between efficiency and the equality that is necessary for cohesion. Economic development, for example, cannot be seen in isolation from the enormous impact it has on societal norms and values. Neither can it be seen as a compartmentalized space where the role of ethics is somehow deemed to be of but peripheral concern, or even in some cases of abstract irrelevance. Neither can we ignore the richness of such intuitive wisdom as is located in the collective memory of those societies and groups towards whom models based on a discredited modernization theory, with its assumptions of developed and backward societies and flawed methodology, is often directed. Ethnocentric in assumptions, determining in its prescriptions, weak in its assumptions of a single linear path to growth, this model dominated the social sciences for decades. I was one of those who went from Ireland to the United States and joined young students from South America and elsewhere, where, as Orlando Falls Board had put it, we learned to put on the ideological glasses of this model in studying the circumstances of our own people. Quite recently on a plane, somebody met me who knew me many decades ago. He was going to give a lecture in Russia, and I asked him what was it about. And he said, "I never thought these old notes would have been any value, but here I go again." And on it went. As we move forward, we will have an opportunity to close the gaps. You will, as young students and scholars, to close the gaps that have been created between morality, ethics, and economic and social policy. An opportunity to move away, in fact, from a de-peopled economy constructed exclusively on self-interested and short-term needs to the exclusion of all else. We can once again return to an economic model that protects the common interest, recognizes the worth of collective decision-making, and understands the negative consequences of a completely laissez-faire approach to the operation of market mechanisms. New economics and new policies must draw too on a wider and richer cultural basis. The collective character of economics must be restored as we recognize the intrinsic flaws in the principle that the economic impulse is inherently individualistic. This is a debate that Australia's major cultural economist David Thrasby had with Michael Volkerling, which Thrasby suggested the economic impulse is individualistic, the cultural impulse is collectivist, so therefore they are not reconciled in epistemological or in methodological terms. It is a nonsense because the future, I believe, of economics is as political economy within a cultural system with all its assumptions. If we are to craft a healthy, equal and inclusive society, we need a strong vision that can see clearly beyond the baleful consequences of the radical individualism which threatened in recent years to kill our social independence and inflicted the hurts of unemployment, hugely reduced incomes, negative equity, and young people departing from our airports every week in search of a better life. As we create a different version of our Irishness, we must not forget to turn to an older wisdom, that while respecting material comfort and security is a basic right of all, also recognizes that many of the most valuable things in life cannot be measured, and that market fundamentalism should not take priority over social justice and community cohesion. We must also have the intellectual courage to imagine different futures and seek to achieve them. There is no single wisdom at the heart of a single model of economy that should be driving development work around the world. The work of people like James C. Scott from Yale and otherwise shows how on occasionally, if you look, for example, at places where thousands of hectares have been cleared of their varying foliage to plant palm oil that is useless to local people who are living locally. Suddenly people have gone from sufficiency in communities to be entirely imperiled at the mercy of an elite that might control the export crop. That is the legacy. That's the legacy where you must make your moral choice, that you break away from these assumptions into new forms of academic work and academic models and so on, if one wants to make a difference. I'm simply making the case for a plurality of discourses, a plurality of models. I think, too, that we know that the new models that need to develop, if we are to move out of recession and also meet the very serious global challenges that now face us at global level. There are growing inequities between the developing and the developed world with regard to the distribution of wealth and the rights of the labor force. Developed countries are facing their own crises with rising unemployment and recession, and innovative solutions will be required to underpin creative entrepreneurship and job creation. With globalization and technological innovations, the world is becoming ever smaller and more interdependent. But with the differing speeds of capital and labor, ever creating new issues in labor rights, new inequalities are also emerging. In this country, our key resource is our people. Irish people are known worldwide for their creativity and innovation, and we must build upon that reputation. Our country is full of talented, creative, and generous people, and we need to harness all of those attributes, abilities, and skills to create a positive roadmap towards our shared futures. Our future will be built on our ingenuity if we provide the best environment to allow our citizens to think reflectively and ethically, innovate, compete globally, and create the jobs of the future. creating rich cultural community resources as an aspect of our citizenship affords us the best opportunities for the yield of our cultural industries. I just offer one example. Before I came out, I was looking at some old papers, and I saw that of the interest that is there now as we have moved from a debate about arts and culture to the possibilities of the cultural industries. The point I am making is that if you have a creative community and culture widely disseminated, you have created a great platform from which to take advantage of what are now one of the fastest growth areas in the world. The creative industries, for example, in international trade between 2000 and 2005 increased by 8.7%. The creative goods and services in world trade in 2005 were 424.4 billion, 3.4% of world trade. The European Union's turnover in that year in creative industry was 654 billion euro. And the growth in this area was 12.3% faster than the EU. When I look at all of that, and people now say, this is something we must get a part of to create the jobs and employment we want. But if one is to do that not as a stroke, but as something that makes sense, something to which you can deliver creativity of people, you do so from the base of accepting culture and creativity as the part of our lives in communities that are rich and in which our people are skilled. It is the way to go forward. Developed countries, as I think as well, we have in the past, I believe myself, and continue today, to generate a workforce of motivated people that are adaptable and flexible, a generation of innovative thinkers that will have many jobs and careers over their lifetimes. That's why I have to say, as President of Ireland, responsible and trying to speak in the interests of Irish people, that it is very important that people be invited to the fullness of their development. Yes, it is necessary to have the skills that will turn into employability and so on. But it is also necessary to have the skills that will bring you through a lifetime that will be as full of some disappointments as well as successes. And we are fortunate to have educational institutions still that do not just disseminate data, but give their students the space to think. Although I believe that is shrinking, and to grow as rounded human beings and develop the intellectual tools to create knowledge, because knowledge is not static, but emerges when there is an opportunity for peaceful reflection and original thought, often through cooperation with others. In this way, Ireland, I believe, can nurture its capacity to generate new knowledge within and across our academic institutions and enterprise. And we can increase our capacity to use new knowledge, wherever generated, in an interactive and open system of innovation. A system that does not compartmentalize between the liberal arts and the sciences, but appreciates and promotes the fertile common ground that can be cultivated through fruitful multidisciplinary approaches. I think in another time I have written before and spoken about what I call the Cartesian fallacy. That moment when people broke away suggested there was a fundamental difference between culture and science, when all the evidence of our world that both our opportunities and our threats require a recombination of these forms of thought. Ireland has a leading role to play on the world stage, and we must strengthen every strand of our international reputation, a reputation that has been damaged. But our reputation has been made strong, from culture and the arts to business innovation to humanitarian and peacekeeping work, to the contributions made by the Irish in so many countries. And as we rebuild and restore Ireland's reputation abroad, we must highlight the best of our traditions, as well as that wonderful spark of creativity that so defines our national character. As the newly elected president of our country, the 9th president, I am very conscious that for the first time in many years, young people now graduating from college are faced with very uncertain futures. I do hope that they stay in contact with this country And everything I can do will be done to make sure that you stay in touch with us, because you are still Irish, the Irish somewhere else, whom I hope can return to this country and change it. However, it is recognised that Ireland's higher education system has been the foundation of our economic development of the past, and it will have an important role to play in the future. In fact, a role in reimagining a future economy that is innovative, efficient, sustainable, and constructed on strong ethics and moral principles, that is conducive to a healthy and cohesive society. It is clear to me that the students who are gathered here today and the students who will take part in this forum to consider issues of such fundamental importance to Ireland's future development are not content to just assimilate the existing body of theory and knowledge, to perform to the music that is taken as acceptable, but to make their own music too, and wish to use their knowledge and learning, as well as their idealism and their social concern, to directly influence the debate on what kind of economy, and indeed what kind of society, because both are inextricably linked, will follow in the footsteps of the recently expired Celtic Tiger. A reversion to old models whose success was both transitory and illusory, and ultimately caused such untold misery, would be a waste of time, will not suffice. I stated recently that as a country we need new ideas and new thinking if we are to restore strength to our fragile economy. To navigate successfully through today's troubled, uncertain, and probably uncharted waters, now more than ever before, we need people like you, with confidence to question the failed assumptions, the imagination to consider bold new strategies, and the idealism to care deeply about the kind of Ireland that you and your children wish to live in. And this is not an empty utopia. It is one time, as Professor Ruth Levitas has written, following Ernst Bloch, that it is one thing to speak of utopia as the basis of hope, but what is important is the will to turn it into a praxis that can be delivered within and in the context of institutions that can deliver change and answers to urgent social problems. The evidence for this forum has come from students who in their wisdom know perfectly well that rebuilding Ireland in a new image will require innovative ideas and the proactive engagement of this upcoming generation of thinkers and future leaders. We can begin the battle for Ireland's future in some small way this afternoon in the initiation of a critical discourse about innovative economic approaches in these turbulent times. And you will be taking the opportunity, I know, of redefining political economy and restoring the social science subjects to the critical role which they are so desperately need to fulfill in the future. May I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to address you here this evening. It is uplifting to see so many young people willing to contribute and to play their part in shaping a future of which we can all be proud. Gur míle maithagí go léir is guim gach rá an fórum agus tá súlam go méid díspórach bríomhar is tarí mar buint leis. Gur maithagí.